They said he took her as payment. They said he traded a horse for a slave. What Wade Carrick didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the woman tied to his fence carried a name, powerful enough to start a war. Before we ride any further into this story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Wade Carrick had spent 12 long years keeping to himself on a stretch of dry earth, just outside Broken Mesa. Before that, he'd ridden hard miles as a trail scout, guiding army convoys through bad country and pushing cattle across land that didn't forgive mistakes. That life ended the day a caravan raid left his younger brother bleeding in the dust, a bullet buried deep in his ribs, while Wade had been too far ahead to do a damn thing about it. He buried his brother with his own hands. After that, he buried the rest of himself. He stopped taking contracts. He built a cabin out of scrap lumber and bent nails scavenged from abandoned wagons. He kept just enough cattle to survive and nothing more. No wife, no hired hands. No neighbors dropping by. Just the land, 2 steady horses, and a rifle he only reached for when a coyote got bold near the chicken pen. His goal was simple: avoid people and the trouble they dragged behind them. That evening, he had just hauled a tin pail of water up from the well and was scraping dried mud from his boots when he heard horses approaching from the south trail. Hoofbeats, carried differently depending on how men rode. These weren't steady or disciplined. The rhythm wavered, unbalanced, drunk, tired, maybe both. Wade paused, straightened slowly, and studied the tree line. He thought about stepping inside for his rifle. He decided against it. Walking out armed could spark something he didn't want to finish. 3 riders pushed through the dust haze. Their clothes were streaked with sweat and trail grime, faces rough with days of stubble. One wore a cavalry coat stripped of insignia. Another had a jagged scar over his eyebrow. The third carried the sour smell of whiskey strong enough to drift ahead of him. Their horses were lathered and breathing hard. Wade stayed by the fence, expression unreadable. He didn't wave, didn't nod, didn't ask what they wanted. Men who arrived uninvited rarely came bearing good intentions. The lead rider lifted a hand like they were old friends. "Evening," he called, voice scraped raw. "We've come to trade." Wade said nothing. Silence made men nervous. The rider kept talking. "That bay mare of yours. We were told she'd be ours after last spring's work. We're here to collect." His eyes were bloodshot. His words slurred just enough to blame it on fatigue if questioned. Wade's jaw flexed once. "I don't owe you anything," he replied evenly. The rider jerked his chin toward the back. "Got payment with us?" That's when Wade noticed the rope looped from a saddle horn trailing back. A woman walked behind the last horse, wrists bound tight in front of her. The rope dug deep enough to leave angry red grooves. Her ankles were scraped raw. She was barefoot. Every step trembled, like her legs threatened to give out. Yet she forced herself upright again and again. Long black hair clung to her face with sweat and dust. The deerskin dress she wore was torn along the side and across the chest, exposing bruised skin near her collarbone and the upper curve of one breast. Dirt streaked every inch of her. They stopped short of the fence. The rider gave the rope a sharp tug. She stumbled forward but didn't cry out. Her head remained lowered. Her breathing was thin, uneven. The lead man grinned. "Caught her stealing near the canyon. Army doesn't want her. We're leaving her here. You get the horse. We get the mare. Nobody argues." Wade looked at the woman, then at the men. His face stayed still, but something tightened in his gut. He understood what they were offering, an easy exchange, no questions asked. He also knew what refusal might bring. 3 half-drunk men with guns and nothing to lose could leave, more than broken fences behind. "I don't trade people," Wade said quietly. "You ain't trading," the man shot back. "You're receiving. Take the horse. She stays till someone claims her." The tone made it clear. This wasn't a negotiation. Wade weighed the risk. No neighbors close, no backup. A gunfight would echo for miles and solve nothing. Without emotion, he nodded once toward the corral. "Take the mare and ride." They didn't thank him. 2 dismounted and went for the horse he indicated. The third dragged the woman to a fence post and tied her off like dropped cargo. She braced her feet against the post, absorbing the impact without falling. When they mounted again, one of them laughed. If she dies here, bury her or let the wolves have her. She's your problem now." Dust swallowed them as they rode off. Wade stood still long after they disappeared. He could hear the faint rasp of the woman's breathing, the wind combing through dry brush, the rope creaking against wood. He didn't approach her. Instead, he walked back to the cabin as though nothing had changed. Inside, he removed his hat and sat down heavily. He poured water and drank half of it in one long swallow. He told himself she wasn't his responsibility. Riders from Fort Haven passed through twice a week. They would see her. They would take her. Or they wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't on him. Night settled slowly. He lit a lamp and sliced salted pork into thin strips. He chewed methodically, but memory crept in. The last time he'd ignored. Something that wasn't his business. That memory ended with a grave and blood that hadn't belonged to him alone. He glanced through the doorway. She still stood tied to the post, shoulders sagging now. The temperature was dropping. She had no shoes, no fire, only rope keeping her upright. She hadn't made a sound. An hour passed. Coyotes began to sing to one another in the distance. He lay down but didn't sleep, sat up again. A sour pull twisted in his chest, anger or guilt, he couldn't name it. He muttered a curse and rose. Outside, the air had cooled. He walked to her without speaking. She didn't notice him until he reached for the rope. Her body stiffened, but she didn't fight. His fingers brushed her arm. Her skin burned with fever. He saw the cracked heels of her feet, the trembling in her legs, the rope burns crusted with dried blood. He cut her loose. Her arms dropped instantly. She swayed. He caught her before she hit the dirt. She was lighter than he expected, bone and tension beneath sweat and grime. She didn't speak. Didn't ask anything. Her eyes were half open, unfocused. "I'm not keeping you," he murmured, more to convince himself than her. He carried her inside. Her head rested against his chest. The torn fabric shifted, but he kept his eyes forward. He laid her gently on the spare cot his brother once used, and pulled a blanket over her. Under lamplight, the bruises stood out clearer, ribs, shoulder, a cut along her thigh, swelling around her wrists. Her breathing had that fragile rhythm of a body, hovering between surrender and stubborn survival. He placed a tin cup of water within reach. For a moment he considered asking her name. She was already unconscious. Wade sank back into his chair and stared at the floorboards. She would leave as soon as she could stand, he told himself. He wouldn't ask questions, wouldn't let this become another weight tied to his life. He didn't lie down again. He stayed awake through the night, listening to the wind scrape against the cabin walls and to the faint, uneven breathing of someone he had never planned to save, someone now fighting to stay alive under his roof. At dawn on the third day, Ayanna was standing on her own. Not steady, not strong, but standing. Wade watched from the doorway as she stepped out, into the pale gold light stretching over the flats. His shirt hung loose on her frame, her dark hair braided back now, face cleaner. Though the bruises still shadowed her skin, she looked smaller in the daylight, and somehow less breakable. "You can ride?" he asked. She nodded once. If horse not wild. He almost smiled at that. He saddled his remaining mare without another word. As he tightened the cinch, a tremor rolled through the ground, distant at first, then unmistakable. Hoofbeats, many of them. Wade's hand froze on the leather strap. They crested the ridge in a silent line, Apache riders, painted and armed, eyes sharp as drawn blades. At their front rode an older man, posture straight despite his years, presence commanding enough to quiet the wind. Ayanna stepped forward before Wade could reach for his rifle. She raised her chin and spoke in her own tongue. The old rider's face, hard as sun-baked stone, shifted. Not relief, not quite. Something deeper. He dismounted slowly and approached her, touching his forehead to hers. Wade understood then. She turned back to him. "My father," she said softly. "Chief?" The riders watched Wade with unreadable expressions. He felt the weight of their judgment, their curiosity. The chief studied him for a long moment, then gave a single nod. No threats, no thanks, just understanding. Ayanna mounted one of their horses, but before turning away, she looked at Wade. "You did not trade," she said. "You chose." He didn't answer. The riders moved out as one, disappearing into the rising heat. Wade stood alone again, the land quiet around him. He had lost a horse, but for the first time in 12 years, he hadn't lost himself.